Hey, Shelby.
Hello.
So excited about our In Case You Missed It episode. And because this month, I don't know about you, but I have noticed a ton of opportunity for arguing with people on the internet and arguing with people in my real life. Have you experienced this?
I thought it was just me.
I think it is not just you. And this month, as we on my solo episode talked about how to ask 3 questions before you disagree. And then Justin Jones Fusu's amazing frameworks that he gave us around respectful disagreement just kind of keep coming back to mind. And I was looking at this post that somebody said something that was just totally outlandish. And I had to think for a moment. One, do I want to even ask the 3 questions? Is this somebody that I want to respectfully engage with? Do I know you? Is this important? Is it like I had to go to that space because there's enough possible disagreement in my everyday regular life with people that I actually interact with that I had to go, you know what? I'm just going to leave that alone. And I don't know. I mean, how have you experienced this?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, the internet, there is at every turn good and bad, right? And so, especially, I haven't been on Facebook for years. I haven't been on Facebook long time. But since the storm here in East Tennessee, that's where all of the communication is happening, is Facebook. There's different Facebook groups, chats, things like that. Things that I've not been on Facebook, doing. And I will say there is lots of options for disagreeing. And honestly, with this in mind, I've actually been trying to seek understanding before disagreement, which has been super helpful. There's a huge disagreement happening in one of our local relief shelters. What's happening with that? They're closing for holiday hours. Which is a big disagreement because just because the holidays come doesn't mean people don't need food and heaters and propane and things like that. So huge disagreement. But instead of commenting on this woman's post where I was feeling spicy, I actually direct messaged her and asked some more questions. Did we come to a great place? No, but I have more information.
Well, there you go. I love that. I mean, and just, if you're new to the Joyosity podcast and you're not sure what we're doing here, this is our In Case You Missed It episode where Shelby and I talk about what we were talking about this month. And as we've been talking about respectful disagreement, Shelby is explaining with this great story. And even the work that we do here in our In Case You Missed It episode, we are still working for you as a seasoned leader, or even if you're just starting out, to help you come into the Joyosity community where we are talking about true leadership, that true leadership requires more than just surface level strategies, that it requires a profound commitment to our own humanity and others, that 2, we get curious and we use genuine curiosity so we can create positive culture with all of the complex people that we've got around us, because that means you and that means me. And that 3, that joy is the heartbeat of a healthy leader and a healthy organization. So we are putting joy in the middle of what we do. So as Shelby and I talk through this, I really encourage you to grab your multiple beverages. Today, I have coffee, a smoothie, and 2 waters. I can't even hold them all. And welcome to join the conversation. As this is coming out a little bit before Christmas Day, you may have some more opportunity for respectful disagreement.
Look at all of these opportunities we have around us. Look at them.
Look at us framing that as opportunity. And and I think the story you just told, what I think is really powerful about that is we don't always come to consensus. We don't always come to a closure where everybody's happy. Which I think sometimes is the wrong goal, even though that would be my ultimate goal. Oh, yes, we all agree. But that feels, as soon as I say that, I know that that's not going to happen. So what is actually the goal? And I love the idea of I ask some more questions and I have more information.
And that's the thing is I don't actually know this woman. Her and I's relationship's not important to me. I have only so much energy left in me right now. But I have more information, which for me is like, and honestly, it wasn't even a disagreement because I didn't really even push back because it didn't. I knew I wasn't going to make a difference in this situation, but I knew that if I had a little bit more information, I could help people who are trying to, get supplies there, have more information. And that was the goal. And it wasn't like that her and I would necessarily see eye to eye, but that I could then at least have more information. Whereas we're not all just jumping to these conclusions in these
Mhm.
wonderful Facebook groups that we have.
Yes, yes.
And it was good. It was good that I had that on my mind of like, okay, I feel a little bit, well, I don't know what the word is, like I'm feeling a little angry, and instead of going at on the Facebooks with my opinions, I asked questions and I was curious, and, for me, I felt more peace that way, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like there was no winning. Neither of
Yeah.
us won the argument, but, at least I had, like, Justin's and your, like, idea of curiosity, which is something I've seen come up a lot this month for me of,
Mhm.
like, as soon as I feel pissed off, I'm like, "Wait a second. Imma be curious here. I'm
Yeah.
gonna try it." They keep saying it like that's what we need to do, so I'm just kidding.
I love you're
I
like, "I mean,
I have seen
whatever."
I have seen the power of it over and over again, but I will admit that it is not my first gut reaction to be
Yeah.
curious at all.
Well, I don't know that in the past has it been mine either.
Yeah.
I think that is definitely what I have learned. Some training, but a lot of just true experience of, like you said, it does actually work. And as somebody who, as an Enneagram 7 and you as a 2, we both in general would like to moonwalk our way out of conflict. Like, no thanks, like either privately stew or just pretend it didn't happen. And in that has caused so much more pain for me in my life, that learning the process of okay, A, curiosity first, but then B, what do I do? Because I so wanted to moonwalk my way out of conflict and just ignore or avoid or just pretend it wasn't that big of a deal, always produced these bigger conflicts and bigger issues. But then I had to learn how to do it. So in my TEDx and when I teach on conflict resolution, I always talk about that conflict resolution is first a posture, then it is a set of skills. So that posture of curiosity, that posture of, oh, we're on the same team trying to figure this out. Then I was like, oh crap, well, now what do I do? Like, and so that's why the 3 questions before giving your opinion and Justin's 5 pillars, those things are super helpful when you're in that fuzzy brain space of, I don't really know how to do this.
Well,
To come
and
into
for me,
one.
it's like almost this month has been kind of fun because I'm like, "Oh, I get to practice." Like, I get to practice, so here it is. Which has been
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I do. I get to practice. Yeah, I was talking to a client recently, and I felt that defensiveness come in of like, this isn't about me, this is about you. And I was like, oh, wait. Okay, so I need to get curious, ask some questions. And I had to practice for myself on this phone call of asking some questions. And um, really like, and again, that like, tell me more,
Mhm.
tell me more. How did how did you get that information? Where did it come from? And then really responding to what she said. And also, how's that working? Is that working for you? What else do you need? Like that's another great question to add in those 3 questions that at the end of this phone call got me some really great information that I didn't have before. Um, and also, as a coach and my client being able to go, okay, I can see where the areas we need to start working on, like in some different ways. So what could have been the end of a client relationship, honestly,
Yeah.
easily turned into a really great opportunity.
Well, and I loved, like, I love Justin's story about going to confront his dad and how
Yes.
he had really good influences around him to help him approach that conversation differently. If
Mhm.
y'all wanna just like, that's the portion you should listen to. That's
Yeah.
it. If you don't have time to listen to all the episodes this month, like, I cried. Like, I was
Aw.
just like, I thought that was so beautiful because I know the Will Smith episode he's talking about, like, and, like, I know in my own personal life and world, it's like when you start to understand your parents that way, you realize, "Oh, we're all just humans with different problems that we're
Yes.
trying to figure out," right?
Yeah. And it was such a beautiful story too, and he talked about how can I turn this rather than, an adversarial confrontation into like, I'm going to best him, like I'm gonna go get it. It was very much of how can I start this as a conversation, which I find so, so powerful. And I talk a lot when I'm doing, again, training on feedback and in conflict resolution is what can make this kind? Like, how can this be a kind confrontation
Mhm.
of a way to show a mirror, a way to build connection? When I do that, it always turns into a better situation every time. It's, but it feels so vulnerable and scary.
Well, and I loved what I can't remember if it was you or him that said, "When we are, like, looking for connection, oftentimes we're seeking control."
Mm.
And I was like,
Oh, yeah. I want to control this. And that idea behind really connecting over what we have in common. I think we discount it because it seems so simple, like find the common ground. And when really that is the way we start. Like if we don't start on the common ground, we are always looking at the things that aren't working. We're always looking at the disparate opinion. We're always looking at the farthest apart. And you see, like, well, I can't jump that. And it's a little bit like I was working with another client on setting some new habits. She's got some very specific goals that she wants to accomplish that require some new habits, essentially. And we're going to do this. I'm going to block this time. I'm going to block 5 hours every day. Like, that's just unreasonable. And you can't ever get there. So we went to the tiny, small habit. And I think it's like that when we have these types of conversations. If we're always looking at the ends rather than, well, what do we both want? What is the common thing? It just feels too daunting and too overwhelming. But when you discover that, like, oh, we both want X, Y, and Z. Okay. Now we feel like we're coming at it from the same place rather than there's just no way we're on completely different islands.
yeah. And I love your definition of is it conflict? The differing goals, limited
Yes.
resources.
Yeah,
I
so
think
my definition of conflict is the struggle between limited resources and differing goals. Like, if we approach it that way, it just feels so much less attacky and
yeah.
personal.
Well, and
Ooh.
I think about that often with, like, even my husband or my kids where it's like, "Okay, we have differing goals." Like, my four-year-old wants to stay awake all night long. I wanna go to sleep. Differing goals.
Same living with a 20-year-old, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
say. So
I'm like, "Please just let me sleep." Okay. But knowing that, like, okay, like, he's not trying to make my life miserable by not allowing me to go to sleep right now, like, he just wants to stay awake and hop around on his bed, right? Like, and it's like, okay, like, how do we bridge that gap? I've not figured it out,
Yeah.
but 3 questions,
It's
great place to start.
it is such a great place to start. As all of my kids come home from college break, I have one that is graduating and moving back home for a little while because he has some possibly he may be moving out of the country, he may be going to law school, he's not sure. And so getting an apartment, doesn't make a
Yeah,
lot of sense. So he's coming home for a couple months and having a 22-year-old who's a college graduate move back home, we're going to renegotiate some things. And then the other two who are going back early January, we've got all of these. Then they've got their younger sister who's always here and used
right.
to our rules. And it just makes me think about how am I going to approach that as well? Like, I really need to ask a lot more questions rather than just because I'm dealing with adults.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even the 15-year
They're
old
like, "You're
is
adults," but yeah.
they're like real adults. And but we all have to live under the same roof, and I still need sleep. It is not really about controlling them. It's like you coming home at 1 a.m. means I don't sleep as well. So how can I understand what you're wanting, and how can I also express what I'm wanting? That it's not about control, like it's about my own health. It's some good things to think about. And
And, like,
yeah.
I think, I loved how Justin welcomes disagreement on his team,
Mhm.
and I want to start doing that. I actually asked one of my teammates that on our recent call. I was like,
Mhm.
"I want you to disagree with me because I know that because I've been doing it as my business has grown. I went from just me to, this team of 5, and it's like, there's things I'm doing that I know aren't the most efficient or best way to be doing it. It's just how I've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah.
So I want you to disagree with me, or I want you to say like, maybe we should try this. Like, it's okay. But how do we deal with like when we get through that conversation, that hard conflict conversation, we still aren't on the same page,
Mm.
and you have to kind of enforce as the leader maybe a boundary or a policy
Yeah.
that is outright disagreed with now, and you know that because you
Yeah.
asked for it.
Yeah, well, I think there's so many layers to that. One is knowing your own, like, Enneagram type is
Mm,
super important because some people are like, "Oh my gosh, I've failed people and they're gonna reject me," or others are like, "Oh, what if this is something I really didn't know?" And that insecurity comes out, or, there's all like, dealing with your own disappointment of the disagreement, I think is part of it. But what I think is really powerful that I have found in my leadership and helping other, teams through is as the leader, sometimes you do have to make difficult decisions. But
mhm.
when you hear people and you really truly like understand their perspective, the secret sauce is to go back and say, did I really hear you? I heard you. Is this what you were trying to say? Yes. Okay. I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you disagreeing with me. There are other components that perspectives that you don't have that I'm going to have to make a final call that is different than what you wanted. So I wanted to come back and tell you that. And here are my reasons why I'm going to choose this. And I also think there's some power in setting a time limit on it. So, like, I've recently changed some things in how I'm running the Joyosity Leadership Lab. So, the way I serve my women's leadership mastermind. And I've said, we're going to try this for the next 5 months. We're going to do this January through April and then revisit, because even though I have a different perspective and as the leader I am responsible for making that choice, I still don't know, like, I can't just say, well, this is totally going to work now because of X, Y, and Z. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of power in welcoming the disagreement, going back and saying, I really did hear you. I appreciate you disagreeing. Here's why I'm making a different choice. And we're going to try it for a certain amount of time. I just think every time I do that, there is so much more ability to disagree and commit and
right.
still be a part of the team because there's that understanding of why.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I know because I've been on plenty of teams where like I've disagreed with calls, but if I know that they have listened to me, I'm okay. Like, even if I think that you're y- making a different decision than I would make, I can also recognize that you're the one in charge and I don't want to be the one in charge a lot of times. So good luck. Good luck
Yeah.
with that. You know what I mean? Like, it's the
Yeah.
same with any like political things. Like, it's like, I don't agree with that. And it's like, but I also don't want to be the one to have to figure out this problem.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it's a lot of times I feel like are like any leaders, that's kind of part of it. And I'm learning that on my team and in my family as a leader of, my children, and learning that like sometimes being the leader means people disagreeing with you.
Yeah,
Actually, a lot of times it does. And that's
absolutely.
okay. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that was so powerful about Justin's 5 pillars that I think is like not just you leading a team, you leading inside an organization, but when you're around the holiday table or you're out and about, that is so powerful is really being okay with the gray. Like,
Yes.
it's not the finding middle ground. That's different than common ground, like, or
Mhm.
splitting the difference. There's that great book, like Never Split the Difference. It is really being okay with the gray aspects of relationships. Back to that idea we were chatting before we hopped on actually recording is that sometimes in our culture, we have equated and conflated I disagree with you means I hate you,
Yeah.
which leaves no room for connection in the gray. Like there's just no space for that. And I found that particular pillar of Justin's really such a great reminder of that the gray is is really okay.
Mhm. Well, and I remember, like, um, I have a hard time, and maybe this is an Enneagram 2 thing. I have a hard time with people being upset with me. I have a hard time with people being mad at me. Okay, if somebody's mad at me, I'm like, "Let me fix it, let me fix it, let me fix it." And early on in my marriage, my husband's like, "Just let me be mad." And I was like, "What?" I can do he's like, "I'll be fine. Just let me be mad at you for a second." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And sure
I didn't
enough,
know that was an option.
yeah, exactly, and sure enough, like, he comes out, he's like, "Yeah, I was mad, and, like, I still don't think you did the right thing, but I love you, blah, blah, blah," like, and it's like, "Oh, that's how that works?" Like, we don't have to just, like
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
feel that a lot with this, disagreement idea of, like, there's this gray area where you think this thing and I think this thing, but it's not like this, it's more like this. Like, we're just right there, you know what I mean? A
Yeah.
lot of times where it's like, yeah, we do have different ideas where we have a different, take on something, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that all of these other things are true that we hear. You get what like, because sometimes I feel like if we have disagreements, and especially when it's like these hot topic political things,
Mhm.
where if you say one thing, then all of these things are assigned to you, right? Because
Yes.
those are all of the talking points for this side or this side. And
Mhm.
it's like, but then you get talking, like the curiosity thing,
Yeah.
asking questions with people, and you're like, oh, okay. So you actually don't hate XYZ or this and that. And I don't know, it's just I constantly have to remind myself, especially with the holidays, all of us have, like, these different little crazy devices that are, like, feeding us different perspectives on different
Yes.
things, and if you don't know what's on that person's algorithm, a lot of times
Yeah.
you can go I don't know, like, it can create such a divide that doesn't have to be there,
Yeah.
and one thing I offered my dad, because he and my younger sister were having disagreements politically,
Mm.
and I said, "Invite her to send you the content that she's seeing,"
Mhm.
because a lot of times you've got your algorithm feed with all of your talking points, and she's got hers, and they're pitting you against each other, but invite each other to share the content with each other, and it's
Mhm.
actually incredible how you're like, "Oh, I could see exactly how you got to there from that piece,
Yeah.
that I saw, or this, vice versa."
It goes with Justin's first pillar of challenging your perspective. Like when we
Yes.
challenge our own perspective on a regular basis, we develop that muscle of being okay with seeing things that I don't agree with. Because I mean, I'm not going to get up on a soapbox, just a little baby soapbox, not a big one, of that because so much of our culture has become tailored because that's what sells, because that's what we as
Mhm.
humans naturally want to slide toward. Your story about the algorithm is so true. I was reading this week that is even true of uh, a Bible app, not the Bible app, a different one, called Bible Gateway, that it tailors different things. Like it has an algorithm to it that I had no idea. And I was like, whoa, like even
It's
that is,
everywhere, yeah.
it's everywhere. And because of that, we truly see things different we see things differently and we see different things. So what I
Yeah.
love about what you just said is not, well, I'm going to prove it to you with receipts. Like you're going to
Mhm.
bring those, and this is why. Invite somebody to share with them, with you, what
Mhm.
they're seeing is so powerful. Back to that. Well, that second question, where did you get that information?
Yeah.
Who's told you that? Where did you find that? Because oftentimes you're like, well, no wonder you think XYZ, because here's your set of facts. And that's a different discussion.
I think it's really, a hard thing. I'm grateful I'm not parenting teenagers right now, but my day will come. My day will come. But I think that's a really important thing with this, like, with the internet. Like, it's so wild, it's so powerful,
Mhm,
and if you're not inviting your kids to, like, share with you what they are
mhm.
consuming, wow. Like, things can get wild real
Yeah,
fast.
because
Yeah.
you have no idea what they're looking at, not in a way, again, that is big brother, checking
Yeah.
in, that kind of thing, but just you can't see what they're seeing. Like you
Yeah.
literally are seeing a different perspective.
Yeah.
And there's so much power in that simple question of, well, where did you find that out? Who told you? Where did you read that? There are a lot of different ways to ask that question that doesn't feel attacky.
Yes.
And um, one of my friends, Erin Walsh, has recently written a book called It's Their World. She is a media and parenting expert. And I just love that title of It's Their World. And like, it's so how do you get into it and like let
Mhm.
them invite you in? It's the same idea that we can do with adults on
Yeah.
your team, like, oh, where did you hear that? Oh, well, the graphic designer told me that. Oh, okay. Or the client told me that. Or it's the same question. I'm inviting people to share with you where they're getting their ideas is so powerful because it's respectful. You're not
Mhm.
just assuming they've made something up,
Yes.
like fighting about the source being valid or not is a totally different thing, but but at least you know where it's coming from, you
Right,
know?
right. Well, and that curiosity of just not, assuming you're right all the time and that your ideas are always the most correct or whatever.
Mhm.
I just really loved that idea, and it's just come up a lot even with, like, in my home and on my team, of just asking to see their perspectives. So it's
Mhm.
challenging our perspective, like Justin says, but asking for their perspective. And then I super love how you have those 3 questions before engaging in, like, a conflict, because that's really slowed me down, because I
Mm.
think my brain I don't know, I think my brain might be a little bit different, and sometimes I get a little carried away and excited, or, like, I interrupt people, or I think that I know that where they're going with things, right?
Oh my gosh.
And for me, like,
Completely.
being like, "Wait, I didn't ask 3 questions, I only asked 1. I gotta wait just a second,"
Yeah.
before even just in regular conversations of, like, slowing myself down to actually listen to what the
Mhm.
other person is saying, which
Right? And listening all the way to the end, which
yeah.
is such a challenge. Oh my gosh, why is that so hard? I mean, like,
Yeah.
listening all the way to the end is so
Um,
hard. It's so hard. And I find that even at networking events, I've been thinking a lot about it
mm,
this month. I mean, it's my tool. I mean, I didn't create it, but like
right.
I can't remember where I learned this along the way, but I've honed it into these 3 questions. And like I've been at a couple networking events. I've had to remind myself asking the 3 questions, and it starts to feel just a tiny, tiny bit awkward by the
Mhm.
3rd question,
Mm,
but that is where you tip over into, like, the magic. It's so
yes.
funny about this, like, 3rd question feels a little bit like, "Really?" But then it's like, oh, it's like that's the one that unlocks everything. It's really amazing.
Well, earlier this year, I got the opportunity to go to New York City and meet a bunch of LinkedIn Learning instructors, and it was incredible. And I have had the opportunity of knowing these instructors just through LinkedIn for years and years, as they've been on different people's podcasts that I've produced. And there was one instructor in particular who I know he's brilliant. He is such a smart man, very successful in his career. He was the quietest one in that room.
Mhm.
He was and I noticed it, and after I was like, You didn't act like, there was none of this, like, frantic, "I wanna tell," all the things. He just listened so well that I left that event being like, "There's something to it.
I
If Dean
know.
is doing it, there's something to
Oh,
it."
I know exactly who you're talking about, and it's so
He's
true.
incredible, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, as you're listening to this podcast, right before, the Christmas holidays, and it's after Hanukkah, and depending on what other exciting things you're celebrating over the next couple weeks, we wish you a happy holiday, and hopefully there will be fewer disagreements. But if there are, I hope that you feel equipped to, Shelby and I really hope that you feel equipped to handle them over the next few days, and really in the rest of your life and leadership, because it's what really brings an amount of influence and peace to what you're doing. Um,
Yes, and I know for me, I'm gonna take curiosity into 2025. I'm gonna make sure that that's something that I really, focus on in these conversations, of just being curious first, practicing that skill. So,
mhm. It's definitely a practice.
yeah.
Oh, well, happy holidays, everybody. We will see you back here on Wednesday next week, as always. So let me put my coach hat on for just a moment. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them what you're going to do. Check the show notes for all the links and connect with us on LinkedIn and all the other socials, or just, drop me an email at Jen with 2 N's at jenwhitmer.com. We want to keep this conversation going with you. I know your earballs have a lot coming at them, so thank you for listening to the Joyosity podcast and being a part of our community. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It helps more people join us in the movement to create positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.